We're into our final week of our dig at one of the most important archaeological sites in Europe, Sutton Hoo. Over the last 3 weeks, we've been piecing together its development from prehistoric farmland to royal burial ground. We've pushed the story way back to the Mesolithic era. And now we're zoning in on when and why the Anglo Saxons stopped using the cemetery in Garden Field and began a series of increasingly spectacular burial mounds, culminating in the famous warrior king's ship burial. And the contents of the exotic cremation vessel known as the Bromeswell Bucket might hold the secret, if we can find them. Matt and Cecily arrive back on site to help Justin with the final push.
Well, the latest is we've taken most of the modern plough soil away, and we're in a buried soil which still has some plough damage, but we are defining cremation burials. We have maybe 5 or 6 of them, so there's a couple of nice ones you can see over there and sticking out the edge of the excavation. And then there's another fairly clear one here, which we had metalwork objects out of.
And there was finds in the topsoil above these, wasn't there? That was kind of giving us an indication of what was below.
So lots of little bits of sheet bronze, lots of bits of molten bronze, probably from either ploughed out of the cremations or possibly from pyre sites.
And I remember there was a huge metal detecting signal around here somewhere, wasn't there? So what's the plan there?
The metal detector signals have changed as we've gone down. So rather than lots of different objects, we think we have one large single object with a little group off to one side. We're also starting to get a little circular shape of plough soil with little bits of bronze sheet metal sticking up at the edges. So we have a bronze vessel of some kind.
Matt's put to work in the extension of the trench where the pipeline is now clearly visible. Over here is the exhibition centre, which was put up in the year 2001. But while they were digging the footings, they found an Anglo Saxon cemetery right under there. And we are excavating in that field over there because we think the cemetery might have extended as far as that. But while they're poking around looking for evidence, I'm going to have a look inside here because they've got some fantastic finds. Inside are sumptuous reconstructions of the gold and garnet grave goods that were found inside the burial chamber of the great ship in Mount One. Bam! The gold! This is a shield, of course, and all this gold would have been mounted onto curved lime wooden planks, but boff, it's just so impressive, isn't it? And over here, what can you say about this weaponry? Absolutely glorious. But the creme de la creme is here, the king's helmet. Take a look at that. Although these are reconstructions, they demonstrate a level of craftsmanship which forced a recalibration of the idea of the Anglo-Saxon Dark Ages.
I think everybody knows that the metalwork that was buried in Mount One is of an extraordinary quality. That is pretty revolutionary. The textiles which we're finding, they're pretty interesting as well, and they have a lot of different colours to them. That's a bit of a revolution. And then the boat itself seems to be a revolution attached to a general change in the quality of carpentry. Anglo-Saxon houses, in the 6th century tend to be rows of posts. Each post is in its hole. And then you can tension it with cross beams, thatch it and so on. So that's a fairly basic sort of house. However, from the early 7th century, we're getting timber-framed houses. So there are long beams, there are wall plates, there are cross beams, 2 bits of timber are joined with scarf joints and secured with pegs, with trenails. And that is what we're getting in our ship as well. So the great halls of Yevering are the precursors to the Sutton Hoo ship, in my view.
Something you said then, it had never crossed my mind before about this burial. When Queen Elizabeth II died, there were all these craftspeople and artisans who were making a special thing for the funeral, and they focused on the fact that they had chosen the loveliest thing. And in my mind's eye, that was a rather modern revisioning of what a burial should be. But of course, it would have been what happened then, wouldn't it? The Broomswell Bucket is itself a feat of Byzantine craftsmanship. And we're now pretty confident that we've got the missing base, because the fragments that have come up look very convincing.
That looks very like bucket. In fact, that's the best view I've seen. We've got a line here and a line there, and they've got the annular stamps, the circular stamps down here, another line there. Looks like some more stamps here, another line there, something happening here. That's definitely bucket. I very rarely work on anything as important as this that isn't gold. I know that sounds a bit weird, but somehow a brass, something that was made in brass in Byzantium, I just don't come across this in my ordinary everyday work, so it is incredibly exciting.
One man who can attest to the skill of the craftsmanship is Dave Roper, who reconstructed the bucket and many of the other treasures in the museum.
The Bromeswell Bucket, that one almost hospitalised me making it. I ended up with double frozen shoulders just from the repetitive hammering. That was about 3 weeks of raising, which is basically a 3-foot circle of brass sheet. You anneal it, you make it nice and hot, you slowly cool it, and you start beating. You leave the bottom of your bucket piece, which is the centre of your circle, flat, and you raise the rest. So the rest of your 3-foot circle is eventually compressed and brought in until you've got a saucepan shape. And the 50,000 hammer blows that it takes did take its toll.
We started getting some grades of bone again.
Right.
And we started to get a circle of grey, what looks like redeposited plough soil.
Yeah.
If we really have found the bottom of the bucket, we're hoping that some of the cremation inside it might have survived to tell us about the burial and the person cremated in it.
But I'm wondering, given there might not be much of the bucket left in situ, that there might not be a lot of the cremation left in situ as well.
Yeah. The thing with the burials, though, the cremated bone would normally be towards the lower end of any vessel that it's contained in. Usually, you'll get maybe 8-10 centimetres.
Because it's quite a big diameter vessel as well.
Yeah, you'd get about 8-10 centimetres depth. So it can survive even in quite shallow deposits.
And sometimes it can be stuck to it as well, can't it?
Back in Tranmere House, the bags of soil, which might include disturbed cremations, are being collected for Jackie and Naomi to examine.
I would have expected we'd get some cremated animal bone, particularly if you've got something high status, because the early cremation burials that you get from the Anglo Saxon period, they really went big time. They were quite flamboyant in what went on the pyre, and there were quite often quite a lot of animal remains went on there, either sometimes entire horses, whole dogs, they're kind of like status animals, but you also had, food offerings, so you have pig, sheep, cattle, sometimes you've got bird, not very often. So I'm not put off by the idea that we've got cremated animal bone, and I can't, there's some bits up here which may well be human, that might be human, but that I think is definitely animal bone, but that doesn't worry me too much.
That's a stone, that's a stone. I think it's one of Robert Pretty's marbles.
We found a lot of scattered flints in the plough soil, and now Madeline has found a concentration which could indicate a workspace. It's hard to see features emerging in the sandy soil, especially in the strong sunshine. In excavations in the 80s, before the days of drones, Helen and the team would climb a tower to get a good look. So when in Rome, as they say.
Now, we have been thinking that that is something like a prehistoric soil, like a plough soil or something, that has slumped into hollows or has been covered in some sand blow or something like that. But there's an alternative in that you can see just in front of Cecily, there's almost a blob of it that's stronger than the rest.
Really, really dark, almost chocolate brown patch there, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. And there has been one where Richard is. Ah, he's right on top of it. That's why I can't see it. There's another one. And 2 human-sized blobs of soily fill.
In the cemetery?
In a cemetery, yes. Well, I'm hoping that they might resolve themselves as we clean and clean and clean into actually inhumation graves. Right. Where Madeline is with the pink shirt is another of these little blobs. But that one seems to be curving all the way down to the bulk, just in front of the little step where they're higher.
Yes.
Now, because they're higher there than they are here, I think it's going to take another trowel definition to see it, but it seems to be a curving cut feature, which I'm tempted to call a ring ditch.
Right, okay.
I may be being a bit previous here.
A ring ditch of that size, do you think it could be the remnants of a burial mound, might have been surrounding a burial mound?
Yes, I think it could be a burial mound because I don't think there's enough domestic debris there for it to be something like a Bronze Age or an Iron Age house. But what date of a burial mound? And often this is done on size because Bronze Age burial mounds are big and traditionally Anglo Saxon burial mounds are small.
Right.
But I would refer you to the large burial mounds that we have down there. So that's a work in progress, and we're not going to know until we've defined it a bit more. I would love it to be an Anglo Saxon burial mound, but I know you're looking towards there, aren't you? Because you're thinking
Wasn't there a Bronze Age burial mound or the remains of one underneath where the visitor centre is?
There was a Middle Bronze Age barrow, and they thought that was the reason why the Anglo-Saxon cemetery was there. So if there's another one here, it might make a multifocal site, which might explain why we've still got the cremations and touch wood, the inhumations coming out this far.
We're completing our metal detecting survey of the field in an area where Roman pottery was found in the past, but everything that's coming up is much later.
A button? Is it a button? Yes, it is. So a worker's button, 1800, part of our history, you know.
So our Roman story is still a mystery. But at least we can say that we've done a comprehensive survey of the field and secured it from nighthawks. As the final week progresses, the temperature is rising. The team are barefoot now to avoid spoiling any of the delicate archaeology. Helen is examining a find discovered in an area of burning near the bucket.
I've got here 2 pieces of iron which came from close to each other in a bit of a black splodge, quite close to some other black splodges. And I thought at first when I looked at them, well, they're just 2 bits of iron. And then I turned one of them over and I thought I could see some textile or something like that. Oh, well, that is so annoying, isn't it? You can see my original hypothesis, there might be textile. We'll treat it as if it's textile. And very quickly, when you put brush to object, which is like putting trowel to earth, you don't find it. What I think we've got here, if you have a look at the screen, is this rounded shape, I think is the loop or the frame of a buckle. And if I pick it up and show you how thick it is there, that's quite unusual for something like a medieval buckle and a Roman buckle. In fact, that's absolutely characteristic of an Anglo-Saxon, an early Anglo-Saxon buckle. And then here, just here, I think that's either it's been made from a piece that's been forged around and not joined, or this is where it's rusted and broken through during the course of its life or its life in the ground. And then if I show you the other bit, now this other bit is just the right size to be the pin or the tongue of the buckle. And if I turn this over a bit, it's got a bit of a curve round. Now there's 2 reasons why you might have a bit of a curve round, either because you're coming round to make the the loop of the pin that would fit around the frame, or this is the pin attached here and it drapes around the edge of the frame. Now there's no buckle pin that does that apart from an early Anglo Saxon one. So I think, even though I can't find definite evidence like Textile that it came out of a grave, I think this is very likely to be an early Anglo Saxon buckle frame and pin that has come out of some kind of grave.
Textiles were preserved on metalwork in the Royal Burial Ground, as well as in the earlier cemetery under the Visitors Centre, and this has shed light on Anglo-Saxon textile manufacture.
I'm Kendra, the forager.
I'm Matilda, I'm the head of the settlement.
I'm Mildriffer.
I'm Sigbert, and I'm the spinner.
The textile group at Sutton Hoo has been experimenting for years to gain insight into the processes involved.
In Mound 1 we have 27 textiles. Even though the soil here is sandy acid, we have 27 textiles that where it's wrapped around a shield boss or a sword or a spear, it has mineralised and oxidised. And from those textiles, we know what sort of weave it is. It's tabby, it's twill or it's diamond weave, and we know the different colours.
Yeah.
They've built up an incredible skills base.
Give it a spin, let it just spin on its own, right? And then up here.
From drop spinning to carding wool, weaving, embroidery and knarl binding.
Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Today, they're experimenting with a range of natural dyes and different metal pots.
What we started with was some weld and some tansy, weeds that just grow here.
What about this one here?
Oh, that one. That was really exciting. So that one is onion skins in here. And again, we've got quite a nice, vibrant yellow.
I have an outfit that I made, so it's an overdress. So I've got an underdress and an overdress, so it's the woad colour, it's the blue colour, and it's also decorated with the weaving, the tablet weaving.
Look at the detail there.
So if you'd like to,
yeah, I'd love to
try it on.
So can we talk about this blue colour, because it's kind of different
so
from everything
you've
else,
got a
isn't it?
complete outfit in blue, and I've got it on here. We call it royal blue because the other dyes we've got, the weld and the madder, are much more easier to dye. But woad, we need to put a piece of land aside. So weld is growing wild and madder, but woad, where people, if you were poor, you'd need to use that strip of land of yours for food, for farming. While woad, you're using it for dyeing.
Make sure we get that back off.
I know.
Oh, I'm running off now. It's mine.
Oh, it's a lovely colour.
Meanwhile, Naomi has set up her stripy flotation tank.
And so I'm not going to agitate it too much.
She's starting to work on the samples taken from the first cremation we found with the 6th century ceramic pot.
Oh, there's some bits of bone there. I can see some odd bits of bone.
Yeah, I can see some bits.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah, 100%.
Sounds like a very hot dog.
Yeah, it's making a weird duck noise. I don't know what's
panting
happening.
noise moment.
Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that.
Oh, crikey, that's good.
Now that's going to be great for who's ever going to be identifying that charcoal.
Yeah. Well, that's likely to have been sort of some of the brushwood type stuff that they put in to get the ignition temperature going, getting the pyre going to start with.
Okay.
Rather than the big logs that would have been the structure itself that would have held the body.
Yeah.
Under the hot sun, the different colours in the sand are beginning to reveal features really clearly now. And Matt's hard at work in his area of the trench.
There's a kind of a browny, pitchy thing down there. And you can see over there, they've tagged out all the features as well. So yeah, it's looking pretty good now actually. You can really see all the cremations. And obviously the service trench down the middle is really clear. And hopefully with a clean like this, you should pick up anything that you haven't seen already. So that's another benefit of this. So this is it really. This is the last push before we start kind of getting down into the features.
That's the soil shape that they've seen.
And some of those features might relate to the grave that the bucket was buried in.
So say we've got a circle of buried soil around here, which is in fact the remains of a mound.
It's possible.
Right, Naomi, I've come to have a look at this piece of pottery.
Ah, yes.
Naomi's been sifting through the samples from cremation number 1
So that's the biggest piece.
and made a discovery.
Oh, right, yeah, you can see there is some bits of decoration on there, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's quite battered, but it's there. Yeah, and it is
Little
thin.
dimples.
Yeah, that is thin.
Yeah, I would have expected it to be that thin.
It's possible it's from a different vessel to the one found in week 1, but that's not the only surprise.
Oh, that is a piece of worked bone. You can see how it's flat, and then you can see the little holes in there, the little decoration, and then like little tooth mark going down there. So that could be part of a composite comb that's been on the pyre. That is fantastic. Lovely. Now we've got one piece. There's going to be more. Wow, look, there we are. There's another piece. So we've got a classic ring and dot decoration. And then the two little lines, three little lines.
No, there's like 5 more bits. Look, one there, one there, one there, one there.
Yeah, okay, let's get all of those out because I don't want them breaking up any smaller. I'm going to get rid of all the other stuff. Right, I've got lots of things. So, right, well spotted, Naomi. Right.
Oh my God.
Right, okay. So, we're going to be able to put quite a lot of this together, I think.
Thank you, tank. Well, you know, before I was saying how we repainted the tank. So in honour of Mick, and look at that. Look at that. Day 1 of me being here. That's the 3rd sample. 3 is the magic number. And look at that, what's come out. I don't know what to say. For once.
Combs have been found in many of the graves. In the hanging bowl under the visitor centre, and in the royal burial ground, with the horse and rider in Mound 17, and in the bronze bowl in Mound 5. Although Mound 5 was the earliest of the mounds, it had a number of much later burials around it, known as the sand bodies.
These are flat graves where a person has been put in, normally with no grave goods, and it's been backfilled, and then they have decayed in precisely the position they are in. We don't just get the bones. In fact, normally we don't get bones at all, but everything like soft tissue stays. So you can see the details of the whole body. So it's a sand body, not a skeleton. And they were almost all in very peculiar and in some ways disturbing positions. You know, you'd look at them and you think, what on earth was going on there?
What do you mean by disturbing? How might they have been?
So here are some pictures. So we've got this one with the hands tied here, and then this one with no head, and this one with a head down at the bottom of their feet. Then this one is probably tied into this contorted position. They've all got really horrible positions. And that one is really one hand behind your back, one hand in front of your back. Then this one has the head chopped off, but then put back, but they're looking upwards. It's up at the top here are teeth where you'd expect the top of the head. I mean, they're all absolutely horrible. Now, the reason I remember all of these is because somebody had to be the model for the artist. So I put on a leotard and a pair of leggings and went and contorted myself. And I do remember that one where you had to they kept saying, get your hand further round behind your back and the other one underneath you. And then Justin took photographs of me contorted like this. And then Jules drew them all up. And the 3 of us produced these rather revolting pictures.
The sand bodies date from the 8th to the 11th centuries and were arranged around some post holes which have been interpreted as the remains of gallows. So the current thinking is that they're execution burials placed deliberately around a pagan mound as a punishment in a Christian era. Back to the 6th century in Garden Field, and Jack is lifting the remains of the cremation burial from which the pieces of bone cone came.
Right, so I'm right at the very bottom of this very heavily damaged vessel here, and laying right on the bottom of the sherd is a piece of that bone comb. But even better there's actually one of the teeth surviving. They're really, really delicate and we've lost them from the rest of it, but it's surviving here. Let's hope it survives lifting. So first off, I'm going to do this little bit of bone here. It's this little bit of comb. Right, that's good. These are the bits which I'm a little bit more concerned about. Come on, sweetie. Okay, right. I'm just loosening around it rather than touching the thing itself. Yay, there we go.
Considering how badly damaged the cremation is, the bone, the comb and ceramics are valuable clues to help us understand the person buried, as well as the date and status of the cemetery. Down in Riverview, children from Melton Primary School are picking up in Test Pit 10. But with it being the hottest day of the year, it's very tough going.
Do we just do this ourselves?
The test pits yielded a surprising amount of flints, which Madeline is fitting into the prehistoric picture she's built up of Sutton Hoo.
Wonderful little flint. Well, people call them burins, or in this case, micro-burins. A burin is burin, which is basically like a little borer or like a little awl to make a hole.
And what kind of age do you think that is?
Microliths tend to be assigned to the Mesolithic period, which is Mesolithic, again lithic, so the Middle Stone Age, the time before agriculture in Western Europe at least. So it may be 6000 BC, roughly. Yeah. What a beautiful blade. It's lovely flint. What's interesting is that the flint you've just shown me, that burin, and this one, it seems to be the same type of sort of pale chamois coloured translucent flint. So even though my first instinct would have been to say, oh, Neolithic blade, possibly it might be earlier and maybe Mesolithic too.
But I like the idea here that we've got the flint and the river and the shells. So we've got, it's almost people using the river perhaps as a supermarket. You know, you pop down the river, get yourself some oyster shells, and maybe you're using the blades to maybe scrape fish scales. You've caught some fish or something.
You certainly could, yes. People perhaps imagine prehistory as just one long dark period, but not at all, not at all.
But none of this explains the intriguing boat-like feature on the geopizz. So Naomi and Henry are looking for signs of old rivers and flooding events that could support the dock theory.
Let's hit the water table.
Oh.
We're well below the geophysics.
Yep.
All the features in the geophysics. We're well below that, and what we know is there's a huge amount of alluvium, so there's been a lot of water here, and relatively slow water.
Henry's results suggest that the water levels have dramatically changed throughout history.
Henry did some coring, so he actually went down up to 3 metres in this area. But his main point of interest really was in here, that's where he went down 3 metres, and he was finding silt. So that is quite helpful, because the trouble with this dock idea is it's not actually pointing to the river, which, you know, that's the way you should be launching a ship. Yeah. So if it's going this way, it must be going into a channel, a water channel that we can't see. So maybe Henry's result is showing us an old filled-in water channel.
Well, that's the old channel.
That would work, because down here is a really big spring which currently goes to the river that way. But maybe if its natural course was that way, back in glacial times, it might have eroded out a big, you know, valley almost down here, which is then slowly filled in, but was big enough maybe in medieval times to launch a boat into.
Angus, I know that the viewers will be saying, we've got this fantastic interesting looking thing here with all these parallel black lines on it. We've been here a month and the result is 2 tiny test pits and Henry investigating a place that isn't even on the anomaly.
Yes. Well, the problem with test pits is they're not really the way to investigate archaeological features. They're more about sampling the ground and looking for pottery. That's what I would use test pits for. You can do a lot of damage with a test pit going down through stuff, especially when it's something as intriguing as that. So the only real approach is, a proper bit of excavation, I think.
Which we haven't got the time or resources to do this time.
Certainly haven't got time at the moment.
But at another time, do you think that that's a likely target for investigation?
It's definitely very intriguing, and I'd like to know what it is.
We clearly need to have another go at Riverview. But back in the trench, there's been a breakthrough. Helen's now completely convinced that the pieces of copper alloy we've found are from the Bromeswell Bucket.
Have a look at the screen here.
Yeah.
You see how there's a line and then this fine ribbing and then a line. Now this worried me at first because I thought, gosh, well that's not how the ornament's made. It's either made with a line or it's made with these lines of punch marks. If we look at the drawing, you can see that there are places where we've got a line and then a line to emphasise it, a straight line and then a line of punch marks.
Now we're sure we need to lift whatever's left of the bucket as quickly and securely as possible. So we've contacted the conservation team at Norwich Castle Museum to come and help lift it in the morning.
So we know that we are missing about a third, say, of it, and it will be no more than about that, and usually going down to nothing. But it could have slid out, leaving more contents.
I mean, it would be really interesting. Jackie, I really agree that it is very interesting, the idea of the side sort of being lifted out and what that would leave, what that separation is, what would remain. It'd be incredible if there are contents.
It'll be an early start for the team tomorrow as they attempt to lift the bucket in a day without destroying the archaeology around it.
If you'd like to see more episodes like this, you can make it happen.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world. Enjoy front row seats for the greatest show on Earth and under it.
Join us this summer for our second season at Sutton Hoo, with extended coverage on Patreon. The big day's here, and the conservation team arrive early to assess how best to lift the bottom of the bucket, which is visibly protruding from the sand.
We're finding bits of upstanding copper alloy vessel, which seem quite solid. So the working theory is that the bucket might be better preserved on this half.
But I mean, I suppose the presumption is that it's probably quite fragmentary. The basic copper alloy vessels tend to be, fairly poor condition because they've held water for so long.
I think we need to see it and know what we're dealing with, don't we?
I agree.
So Cecily continues the delicate process of exposing the surviving pieces of the bucket.
We could definitely use this as a blueprint and just take that piece and just move it around and maybe see where it fits in. Would that be a strategy?
And Helen and Neil are trying to find out where the fragments we've already lifted originally came from.
Yeah.
I just thought that I saw 2 little eyes there. And is that a little nose? No, almost certainly is the answer. It is not. Look at it long enough and you will see somebody looking back and smiling at you.
And there are more pieces emerging all the time.
Oh gosh, it's really thick.
Chunky, heavy as well.
Yes, it is, isn't it? I think it would be sensible to check not only are we missing, whether we're missing a bit, but whether that bit that was identified as lug really was.
Yeah.
Because this looks more like that than anything else. That's a real edge, isn't it?
the Bromeswell Bucket burial could reveal a familial link between the cemetery we're digging and the royal burial ground.
Moving from the possibly scientific to the definitely fictional, which we must do occasionally, I do think they're the same families. I think their ancestors probably landed here. They became the South folk. The big family owners here were buried in the cemetery that we're looking at the moment, and they acquired royal pretensions in the early part of the 7th century or late 6th century. So I think there are some very interesting indications. For example, burial in a bronze bowl, which happens in the cemetery we're beginning to expose more of in our present project. And that carries on into the royal burial ground. So the first burials in the royal burial ground, like the ones in Mound 5, for example, they have burial in bronze bowls, and so does 6, and so does 7. So I think there is a transmission of a sense of belief or a sense of identity or a sense of relationship that is being carried on there. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised if some of the two families thought to be buried in this cemetery that we're looking at now. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them got very well off and was very successful in battle, and therefore was able to claim a leading role in the whole of the area of Suffolk and maybe the whole of East Anglia. Someone like Redwald.
If we can find suitable bone samples, we might be able to put this theory to the test and find out if there were two families buried in the fields or just one. Helen has now identified the piece Cecily found earlier.
And it fits perfectly in the bit of the lug that's missing.
Wonderful.
So we now have two complete lugs.
Oh, that's
great.
lovely.
Please don't find any more lug.
No.
So what have you got?
Yeah, well, I've taken away the last of the plough soil intrusion, and it's coming down onto this sort of dappled, gingery brown soil.
Yes.
And you can see that there are flecks of bone in it. And we've got some upright bits of the bucket here. It looks as though they are positioned by plough damage.
Yeah, because the furrow's coming through there and they're all aligned with it.
That's right.
Oh, wow. So there's basically no change between where we know there's metal and here.
Yes.
It's exactly the same kind of signal.
And where the dappled soil is where the signal starts.
Yeah.
So we're starting to get a better idea of the form of what's left of the bucket.
Yes. Have you been able to see whether it's decorated?
Yes, those three pieces which are sat upright. The sunlight's quite harsh, but in the right light you can see the incised and punched decoration on it.
Oh yes, yeah, I can see it now. I can certainly see engraved stuff.
While work continues, Jack is sheltering in the shade, picking through the samples Naomi has cleaned from the first cremation, and has found more pieces of the bone comb.
You see if I put all that together.
Oh, that's all comb.
That's all bits of the comb. Now, you see that bit there? That's one of the plates with the comb teeth on it. You can see where the teeth would have been, and that is the little hole where the rivet would have gone through. So you would have had a number of these. The reason it's called composite, they're normally, as I said, about that big, and you'd have parts of that going all the way down, and then that strip would have gone down the middle to hold it all together.
This is so tantalising for the people who are looking on. I'll bring it round and show you in a minute.
The other thing we've got here are bits of the pottery itself.
That's a good bit.
That's part of the vessel. And then these are bits of human bone that I picked out yesterday, and bits of burnt flint, which was probably pyre debris. It would have been underneath the pyre and it just got heated up. So there's a whole wondrous plethora of riches there for us to work with.
These clues will be examined in post-excavation work, because how this person was buried could give us an idea of who they were and when they lived. and we're really keen to find as much as we can about the grave in which the bucket was buried, to help us add a significant chapter to the story of Sutton Hoo.
This moment's really exciting for me because I've been rushing about doing various interviews, looking at bits of archaeology. This is the first time I've had a still moment to look at this glorious bucket which is appearing. Cicely, where are we with the bucket?
We know where the metallic signature is. It's in quite a focused area, but we need to be able to see the wider grave cut. So we've been taking it down. One of the really interesting things is that we've actually found the trail of the plough furrow that probably was responsible for pulling the bucket up in the 1980s.
Where's that? Where can we see it?
It's a quite a sort of indistinct line, but it sort of comes across the feature through here and continues in that direction.
So it didn't actually go over where the bucket is now?
No, it really just seems to have clipped it, and it seems because it's had the handle on it that the plough somehow lifted it up through the handle, and the rest of it's torn off and stayed in the ground.
Have we any idea yet how far down this bit of bucket goes? Does it go like to the underneath? Do we get the bottom of it?
That is the big question at the moment, because what we're going to do ideally is expose the sides of it and get underneath it to lift it as a block. If we were to model it on what survives of the bucket that's on display, there's one side of the wall which is quite truncated, so it's possible that this peak that we're seeing here is the beginning of that. And if that's correct, then we might have about that much depth to go.
And if it is correct, then maybe it would fit on to the rest of the bucket like a little piece of jigsaw.
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Wouldn't that be fantastic?
Yeah, and the signature that we get when we take the pin pointer across it is very strong. So fingers crossed, the base of the bucket will be in reasonably good condition.
Are there any marks on it, or is it just all flat?
Yes, on the outside we can see the same incised decoration that's on the extant piece.
Oh wow! Oh, I can just I can see a little mark.
Sort of linear lines, so there'd be part of a figure, part of a dog, part of a warrior, something like that.
That is really exciting.
And these are quite resistant to movement, which suggests to us that they are attached to something more significant that's still in the ground.
You said a couple of minutes ago that what you were after was not just the bucket, but the whole area around it. What might you find?
Well, ideally, we would be able to see the larger hole that the bucket was originally deposited into, and it's possible that this bucket is only one of several objects that were placed in the grave, and it's a bit of a race against time. We need to do it really carefully, but we need to be in a position to have it lifted and safe before the close of play.
And it's 2 o'clock.
Yeah, and time's running out.
What time did you start?
6 o'clock. Yeah, and I can't believe that we're, 8 hours on already.
We have just one day to do it. Now that really does sound like the original timetables, doesn't it?
By mid-afternoon, we can see details emerging.
Oh, I can see a hand. Oh my word. Sorry, I shouldn't have shouted that out so loudly, probably.
Lawrence is doing photogrammetry of each phase of the excavation.
So it is broken off, isn't it?
We're trying to ensure all the loose pieces are rescued before we can lift the remains.
Well, we've got side going down, which means it's going to be quite deep.
Oh, look, it's just fallen off.
We're certainly getting much more of the missing parts of the design than we could have dreamt of.
Oh, look at that.
Oh!
Wow.
They're letters, aren't
Oh
they?
my goodness, it's a face. It's upside
Show me
down.
the face.
Hair here.
Oh, like...
Look, here's
Oh, my goodness.
Well, I'm going to turn it round so you don't have to do that.
God, I wasn't expecting that.
So, there. Hello. That's the first time you've been seen for, what, over 1,000 years?
Oh, well over 1,000, isn't it? Yeah, is it 1,200 years or so?
Gosh.
A face coming at us out of history.
Yes.
That's what you want on time team, isn't it?
So exciting. Who'd have thought that we would have got a face? The eye is in a kind of eye socket. There's the eyebrow.
Yeah.
Here's the brow and the nose and the mouth here. Cheek.
Yeah.
ear, edge
Possibly,
of hair,
yeah.
and then all the hair going off up here. I think these are African hairstyles, and I think that this is an exotic scene. that it's almost like it's an exotic scene from Africa, and the Anglo Saxons to the Romans are almost as exotic and barbarous. I mean, of course, we know it was made in Byzantium, but if we thought it was made in Anglo-Saxon England, we might think it was somebody with clay in their hair, like an Iron Age warrior.
But Byzantium is kind of pretty close to the North African coast anyway.
Yeah.
So.
When I say Byzantium,
Yeah.
I don't necessarily mean Istanbul, modern Istanbul. I don't necessarily mean Constantinople. It could be Antioch. It could be Alexandria. They've all got metalworking hubs. In fact, possibly Alexandria is the most likely.
So you're going to see people like this in the street, probably?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm getting too enthusiastic.
It is just, I mean, yeah, it's a rather extraordinary thing.
Yeah,
That today
yeah.
you've looked on a new face that hasn't been seen.
You know, I'm so often asked what was my favourite find on Time Team, and I kind of groan really because I've answered that question so many times. But this has got a rank in my top 2 or 3.
It's evening and the bucket must be lifted tonight. But we're anxious to go carefully to leave as much as possible of the surrounding archaeology in place, as it may yet contain valuable information to help us understand the burial.
I think, should we make a start?
Let's do it.
So once Justin's confident that he's dug beneath where the base of the bucket should be, it's time to slide the block onto its tray.
Yeah, the whole thing's moving. It's going to. So you want to slide it?
I'm holding it. You slide it. That's it. Brilliant.
Unfortunately, what we really need to do now is cut that down the middle and put the two bits. Can you do that in the magic of Photoshop?
Back in Tranmere House, Neil and Helen are beginning to work out where the missing pieces fit into the design.
This distance here, doesn't that give us the half-point circumference?
Yes.
Yeah, so then we could figure out how...
Yeah,
So,
and I want it to be here because the first bit that came out was that missing bit of lug.
so that looks like it goes here.
Yeah.
So it does feel like there's only one man potentially that is missing.
Yes,
And
we have found the missing man.
We found the missing man.
Yeah, it's the most extraordinary thing. You are only like the 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th people to see this since 580 AD.
We're adding all these new pieces to our digital model as the information emerges. And as evening falls, we're ready to lift.
There's been so much discussion about precisely how we're going to lift this, hasn't there?
That has indeed.
Am I right in saying that lifting it up isn't so difficult, it's the moving it across that you're a bit nervous about?
It's much heavier than it looks. It's got damp soil, and obviously it's still very vulnerable. So we're going to try and move it as swiftly and smoothly as we can onto this sandbag here.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Ooh. It's a bit of a relief, isn't it?
It is.
What happens to it now?
So now it'll go to the conservation lab and be x-rayed so we can see exactly what's inside of it.
So the bucket begins its long journey to York, where it'll be micro-excavated. And the team gets some well-deserved rest. We've reached the final stage of year 1 of our dig, and we're revealing more and more of the story of Sutton Hoo. Cecily now thinks that she can see post holes around the bucket, which might be part of a pyre structure.
We've realised that there are a couple of features that are close enough to the area of the bucket burial to have potentially been associated with the original funeral and the aftermath, and then the creation of a sort of burial monument over it. And they're really quite hard to see, but we've got at least one small post hole in here. It's just a really subtle change in the colour of the soil, so it's slightly darker. But if you look carefully, it's about 20 centimetres across, and there are very occasional flecks of cremated bone in there.
So this could be a rare bustum burial, like the other bronze bowl cremation found under the visitor centre. Some of the students from the local primary school have elected to help us populate our 3D illustrations of what the funerals of people buried at Sutton Hoo might have looked like. And Jack is getting in on the act.
That's so brilliant.
We've been careful to try to interpret the archaeology without destroying it. And the man who knows the site best is Martin.
Now this is, first of all, here there's a circle. So that matches the kind of little small barrows we had in the other cemetery.
So these were from a much earlier period?
I'm not sure. Could be Bronze Age, could be, annoyingly, it could be either. It could be Saxon or Bronze Age. And then there's a sort of lozenge shape here. That could be an inhumation grave. And in this area here, just where Jackie's trowel is moving now, you see the circle of stones. So that was a continuous circle. And that has a cremation in the middle of it, so that could be a cremation burial too.
We have come down onto a series of features, but really, apart from the bucket, we have no idea what they are. Is that a good use of resources?
Well, it's a reasonable question, but the point is you have to make quite a soft landing if you're going to get all these very elusive features defined. So supposing we decided to take another 4 inches off with a machine, then we wouldn't have seen that there had been cremations here at all, because they would have just come up and be dumped on the spoil heap.
Yeah.
But now we've been able to plot where cremations had been, even though they're broken up. But if you don't go down gently, then you miss all the latest features in the sequence. That's the logic of it. Of course, in a different kind of excavation, rescue excavation, we'd go a lot faster.
Yeah.
We'd get right down to the surface where the distinctions are clear, and we were seeing the very bottom of quite a lot of features. Now, we want to see all there is to see of all the features, because this is a research excavation in a very precious site.
So we think we located at least 5 burials, one of which may well have been an inhumation. There are some tantalising ring ditches, which we'd like to investigate further. And a cluster of flints at the end of the trench seem to have been a place where tools were made on site. More evidence of the landscape that the Anglo Saxons inherited when they arrived in the 5th century and began to bury their dead. And it's possible that the cremation burial Jack is working on marks the extent of the early Anglo-Saxon cemetery.
Right, we've got the remnants of this urn here, this cremation urn, and it's very, very crumbly. Is this pottery, so I'm just going to take these few bits and put them in a bag before I start my excavation so they don't get dislodged. And now I'm going to take out the fill of this modern pipe trench that's gone through the middle of it.
And underneath the urn, 75 centimetres down, is the pipe that runs down the centre of the trench.
I was actually expecting something a little bit larger than this.
And that's why we didn't see it in the radar, because it's so small.
Right, yeah.
And we'd said 75 centimetres down.
We're determined not to miss any metal artefacts from the area of the bucket.
That's great. Yeah, that's nothing in there. No.
Which could indicate a bustum burial.
We started to work on the theory that it's the remains of the pyre structure from the original funeral. Now, obviously, the pyre has taken place at a ground surface which we've subsequently lost to ploughing. But what will be interesting during post-excavation, when we took the plough saw down, the modern plough saw down really carefully, we had a fines distribution of what we call metal blobs. And it's possible that these were metal artefacts that the person was wearing when they were buried. They were melted in the intensity of the funeral fire, and they've just turned into blobs effectively. So mapping where they were, if they were in the vicinity of this, we might have actually captured distribution of the funeral pyre by the plough, which would be really interesting.
So the post-excavation starts as our month at Sutton Hoo draws to a close.
I don't know what to say.
We'll be back for our second year's excavations to try to find out if there's an Anglo Saxon dock down by the river and to continue our work in Garden Field.
Because this field is a microcosm of everything, if you understand this field, you can understand the whole of Sutton Hoo, including the mounds.
We've succeeded in rescuing one of the most important finds in this story.
Oh my goodness, it's a face.
I'm sorry, I'm getting too enthusiastic.
We'll follow this beautiful bucket as it undergoes X-rays and scans. We'll be there with Jackie and the team as they take on the painstaking work of the micro-excavation in a bid to try to unlock more of the secrets of Sutton Hoo. And we'll try to find out why and how it became the burial place of kings. Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses, and behind-the-scenes insights.